let's tell you shortly about Albania, because Albania is a very mysterious country for a lot of people, especially the older generation, because for 40 years Albania was completely shut off from the rest of the world. And the reason for that was that they had a crazy dictator who implemented communism, but in reality lived under a dictatorship. His name was Enver Hoxha, and he closed off the country from the rest of the world because he was extremely paranoid. So in Albania, spread across the country, this guy here, he built, I think it was around 700,000 bunkers, which were all fit and preparing for a potential nuclear war. A war that never happened, of course, but this guy here was so paranoid that he built up defenses and these bunkers just in case this would happen. When he died, Albania became more of a democratic country. But at the time, Albania was quite closed off from the rest of the world. They hadn't gained any alliances with other nations. They had the Soviet Union when during Enver Hoxha. Eventually they broke up with the Soviet Union and they became friends with China, which eventually they broke up with. They used to be friends with Yugoslavia, but they cut the ties with Yugoslavia after Tito became the leader there. So since the 90s, which means after Enver Hoxha died, Albania needed to find new friends because they eventually transformed their country into a more democratic and less communist. So today Albania is definitely getting back on track. They have, I read somewhere that they have around 40 embassies in 40 different countries. So they're getting there, definitely. It just takes some time. But what's left of the time during Enver Hoxha is all these bunkers. So that's one plan today. I want to see some of these bunkers because I heard it's such a memory of this, let's say, it's sad past that Albania have had during those 40 years that they were completely closed off from the rest of the world. And I heard, according to some sources, that there are around 175,000 of these bunkers left in Albania still today. So let's see if we can find some of them during our stay here in Tirana. So that was a short history of modern time. If we go back even further in history, Albania has been under a lot of influence. Albanians are originally from a race called Illyrians, which dates back all the way to the Roman time. So actually the Albanian language and also the Albanian people are from this race and this ethnic origin. It's actually a very unique race. Eventually they were invaded and they were under Ottoman rules for quite many 100 years until eventually the Ottoman Empire fell and the communism took over the country, and then eventually today's liberal democracy that they are living under. So I have 1,000 note here, and it's approximately less than 10 euro. So they have this extremely large currency, which makes your pocketbook. They're extremely thick. The street lights here are pretty much light up. You have these reflexes here. I saw that yesterday when I arrived. It's to, I don't know, maybe it's to make it clear that you are actually crossing over, maybe for those that can't see that well. I actually don't know, but it's quite a nice thing though to have a much clearer and broader light. Skanderberg Square, or Skanderbeg Square, which is the main square of Tirana. And this is also the city center, and it's such a big square. Just look at the mountains in the background there, if you can see. It's so enormous. I heard that Albania is pretty much mountainous, like around 70% of the country is mountains, which is pretty amazing. And they have a lot of mountain cities. So they have mountains. Their main export is actually agriculture, like fruits, vegetables, and tobacco. One thing I heard, they're very big on the tobacco market. You have the big Albanian flag there, and you have a mosque there, which reminds me to tell that Albania is mainly a secular state where the majority, according to what I read, please comment in the section below if I'm mistaken, that they are mainly Muslims. But during the time and reign of Enver Hoxha, all religious freedom was expelled, or like exterminated basically. So you were not allowed to express your religious belief, because it was during a communist era, which lasted from 1945 until 1985, when Enver Hoxha died. And in the aftermath of that, Albania still struggled to kind of getting into the world and to basically be more of a normal, let's say normal nation. But Albania opened up eventually. Their big turning point when it come to being open was when the Kosovo crisis in 1998, from 1998 until 1999 happened. Albania wanted to protect the Kosovo Albanians that were being targeted in Kosovo/Serbia. Hello. Wanna watch here? Oh, are they gonna do bicycle? Oh, nice. Cool. Good job, man. Good job. Thanks, man. Bye. Bye-bye. Nice street. Nice kids. So yeah, that was basically how Albania managed to open themselves much more, and they're much more open today. But my impression of Albania or Tirana so far is that they are very curious about foreigners coming here. I don't think this country is very used to tourism yet. We are in Europe, but since it was during a communist era for such a long time, and a very closed off country from the rest of the world for so many years, the tourism never reached Albania until after the 90s, or like beginning of 2000. I have been to quite some Balkan countries so far, Tirana and Albania is definitely the most fascinating so far, because the people here are not, they don't seem to be used to too much tourism. So this is one of the most essential guys in Albanian history. His name is Skanderbeg, and he was a very great military strategist in defeating the Ottomans during their invasion. Skanderbeg, he was an Albanian military commander who led a rebellion against the Ottoman Empire in what is today's Albania, North Macedonia, Greece, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Serbia. He died in 1468, so it's less than 600 years ago. But the Ottomans, they were conquering or having control of today's Albania, and also a lot of other Balkan nations until it fell during or before the First World War. So what I heard was that Albania freed themselves from the Ottomans in 1912, because that was when the First Balkan War started, and eventually they became a communist country when Enver Hoxha took over. I think the square here is one of the biggest squares that I've seen in Europe, and it pretty much reminds me of Alatoy Square in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, because there they also had this enormous flag. In this case it's the Albanian flag. At that time when I visited Bishkek, it was of course the Kyrgyz flag, and you had the Alatoy, the main military strategist in Kyrgyzstan as well. Here you have Skanderbeg, which was also the military strategist, and Kyrgyzstan is also a Muslim country. Here you have Albanian mosques, and you also have this big square here and all these random buildings which seems to be under construction. So pretty similar to Alatoy Square in Bishkek. Commemorating the everlasting friendship between the people of Albania and the people of Kuwait. Albania is such a fascinating country because since Enver Hoxha died, in the aftermath of his death, Albania didn't have much friends, so they tried to build a lot of relationship, which they didn't even knew was possible, with a lot of foreign friends, especially Western partners. And this is an example of how much a small impression can do for this nation. A monument put up to commemorate that politicians from Kuwait visited Albania. Albania has named a whole street after just one single visit from the former president of US, George W. Bush, back in 2007. So they basically just named the whole street after him just because of one visit. And that just explains how much these impressions, these simple visits make on the Albanian leadership or the country of Albania. Albania is one of those countries where the locals are emigrating a lot from. Many of them find jobs in Greece or Italy, which are both EU member states, and it's better payment there, better jobs, better job opportunities. Because in Albania, most of the jobs are either in cafes, restaurants, etc., or agriculture. And I read somewhere that, correct me if I'm mistaken, 50% of the jobs in Albania are related to agriculture. And also, as I mentioned earlier, agriculture is one of those main exports that this country is having. And here you have the biggest mosque in, at least in Tirana. I'm wondering if it's the biggest mosque in the whole country, since we are in the capital. It looks like Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. So majestic, so beautiful. So Albania, as I mentioned earlier, is a secular country. The people here are free to choose their own religion, but the majority are practicing Islam. Let's see if we can get a better look from the other side, or if it's actually possible to enter the mosque at all. I have been to many mosques during my travels, and I think mosques are one of the most beautiful constructions that are ever built. I'm personally not a religious person, but especially mosques are extremely beautiful. I am actually more fan of the architecture in mosque than in churches, for example. I don't know, it's something with the atmosphere inside there. It's so, you have all these people that are just sitting on the floor and worshipping to God. You need to take off your shoes, for example, which is not typical in churches. For Muslims, you need to clean your feet as well. I've never done all this kind of stuff because I'm not a believer, but for those who are doing it, it's a very important ritual to follow these kind of steps in order to make the best out of your time in the mosque. And then you pray for, I think it's 15 minutes. You do this namaz, as it's called, for 15 minutes, and you can do it. I think the rule is, if you're supposed to be a good Muslim, you need to do it 5 times a day. You go to local mosques and just do it there, or you can do it at home, depending on your time. Regarding that, I don't think we can enter. You have all these pillars that you need to follow in order to be a Muslim. Like, there are 5 pillars. For example, you need to pay tax to the poor. You need to go to Mecca, at least if you belong to the Sunni side of the religion. If you belong to Shia, there are some other rules, like you don't go to Mecca, you go to Karbala in Iraq, for example. The fasting and the Ramadan, be kind, basically, and don't drink alcohol, and don't eat any pork. There is a lot of rules, and I think these mosques here, that it seems like we are not allowed to enter in any way. These mosques here are built in the way for people to feel welcomed when they need to do all this kind of ritual. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there is any possibilities to go inside because there are fences everywhere here, and we were basically going on the backside of the mosque, but we can at least enjoy the view from the road here. The biggest mosque in all of Tirana.